Top of the hour now for me too. So let's get started. Hi and welcome everyone. This is the co-working group session at IETF 125. I am Marco Tiloca. My co-chairs are Kansas Morman, also online, and Jaime Jimenez on site. As usual, we assume especially active participants to have read the drafts, at least in the agenda for today. We try to use this time for effective, high-bandwidth discussion to progress the documents. Your participation is collected automatically. If you are there on site, be sure to log in Meetecho. We have 2-minute takers at least, Christian and Richard. Thanks a lot. Please, everyone, help out. The link is in the chat. Okay, and this is not, well, you have seen this before this week, I suppose. It's supposed to be at this point just a reminder of the policies and process we follow here that you have already accepted to follow by participating in this meeting and this session. It's particularly about declaring your personal knowledge of IPR, if you have any, or refraining from participating in related technical discussion, and our code of conduct. So please be nice and professional with one another. If you have questions, ask the working group chairs or your director. A few practicalities. We've been recorded. If you are participating there on site, please join the session on Meetecho and ask to join the queue on the Meetecho mobile tool before going to the mic. For remote participants, try to use headphones, please. And if you really can't talk or it doesn't work well for you, you can write your question in the chat. It will be relayed to the mic. I'll pay attention to the chat. So this is the agenda for today. It doesn't necessarily reflect the status of the documents in terms of process, but we try to have back-to-back documents related to one another and to minimize the change of speaker. We have a little bit more flex time than usual as a safety buffer in the end. But we start with a sequence of back-to-back slots from Karsten about core conf, touching different documents, and correction and clarifications for co-op. We have a very related document also from Christian, your iPad abbreviation for co-op. Jaime on site presents updates on the PubSub document, and Carles about co-op over the bundle protocol. And then we enter into the OSCOR territory. Richard will cover the kudos key update procedure for OSCOR. I conclude with the document on the OSCOR capable proxies and the document for obfuscating the OSCOR option. Does anyone want to bash this agenda? Heard reading none. Let's continue with the document status, with what happened since Montreal. On documents approved for publication, all those shown in this slide were approved already in Montreal, but the first 2 ones here have entered and advanced the editor's queue, and they are right now in Auth 48. And now the process is split into 2 halves about approving the content and the format, and the content is fully approved for the second one here, DTLS ALPN. But I'm confident they can be actually published in the very near future. And then we also have href still in the editor's queue. Then newly approved for publication since Montreal, we have Yangtze Pen under the CoreConf cluster that started as an informational document, eventually was approved to be standard struck. And the 2 initial documents about topics related to group communication for co-op. First one in itself, and then the second one for the security side with protection with group OSCOR. And they are all in the editor's queue now. Looking at what happens also in other working groups with related documents, there have been 2 documents in ACE recently approved for publication as to the distribution of keying material for group OSCOR and the configuration and setup of OSCOR groups using the ACE framework for the sake of access control and authorization. And they're also both in the editor's queue. So back to core on what passed working group last call, we have the PubSub document now in version 19 that Jaime is going to present during the session. Comments from Working Group Last Call should have been addressed. So if all is fine, this can likely enter the shepherding phase soon. And then we have the conditional attributes document for which version 12 was submitted. Well, when the submission system reopened, addressing most of the open issues, there is still one outstanding issue around to handle. It will probably be a topic for an interim meeting in the near future. And looking at related documents in other working groups, still at ACE, there is another document about key provisioning, this time in the interest of the PubSub co-op architecture. The document completed the working group last call, and it's basically now on hold, waiting for the core document about PubSub to be sent to the ISG, since it's a normative reference. And after that, the document can also take the same path. There's also a related document in SCHC, obsoleting actually ETA24 in spite of the document name for using SCHC for header compression and co-op. The working group last call was completed, even though it's not officially declared ended. So we leave that to the discretion of the chairs to progress that. That's where the document is right now. Back to core on yet other documents. There have been two ones that received minor updates at this latest round, so they are not in this session. Please have a look at those. We have recently adopted 3 documents. One is under the core comp cluster, young metadata, that Karsten will cover later today. And there are 2 more on non-traditional responses and co-op over GATT that are both not covered today. And then we have made some updates on 2 individual submissions, and one of those is the last item in the agenda for today. Also, other documents in working groups, other than core, worth mentioning ACE again. There has been updates on 2 transport profiles of ACE related to EDOC and OSCORE and group OSCORE, and also on the use of OSCORE for protecting EST communication. Yeah, and happy to show this slide again. Thank you very much to all the spontaneous reviewers for the working group that covered really a lot of documents. I hope I didn't forget anything here. We owe you 1 docket per review. We'll make it up for that in Vienna, hopefully. We are doing some bookkeeping about this for sure. And a lot of activity on the GitHub. It doesn't have to be a full detailed top-to-bottom review. If you read 1 or 2 sessions alone, you have targeted comments, please don't hesitate. Send a message to the list. This is really important. And thanks for the review so far. Okay, and we have already planned and booked actually the next series of interim meetings for core, resuming in about a month from now, starting on April 22nd, same cadence, same time, and we'll continue like that every other Wednesday until IETF 126. And that should cover the document status and working group status update. So any question or comment before we get into the document presentations? I guess no. So it's on Karsten.
Okay, I think I have pressed all buttons I have to press. Sometimes you have to press a few more buttons than you think should be needed. So I will talk about various CoreConf related items, and then we'll go to corrections and clarifications. I hope I don't need the 34 minutes, 35 minutes that are up there in the timer. So first of all, on the CoreConf side, we have had a lot of discussion about the choice case exception that is needed to get the identifiers that we use in SID files. And I think we now have reached a conclusion what we need to do. There is an errata report being prepared that adds the bold-faced text to Yang descriptions in the Yang models. And yeah, that appears to be consensus, and I think it's a good idea to actually massage the errata report a little bit. So this is currently as a pull request in the Yang CBOR repository of the core working group. It's a pull request because GitHub, it makes it really easy to put in comments on a pull request. So if you have comments on this, please just make a comment on the pull request. We probably will send the actual errata report when we have repaired the remaining issue in Pyang. So Pyang is currently not fully consistent with 9254 and 9595 when it comes to SID file generation, and we still have some implementation work to do. Of course, we should look at other implementations as well, but Pyang is likely going to be the tool that will be used to generate most SID files. So we need to make sure that Pyang does the right thing. Any questions about that? Okay, second item on the list, we haven't had a need to actually modify much in the Komai document, except for one thing. Komai is actually old enough that it used RESTconf Yang data and not SX structure to describe the one item of data in flight that is defined in the document. So again, this is old enough that we didn't have the problem details RFC 9290. So we wrote up the structure in the form of a Yang model for these error reports. We don't want to change that, but we want to go from the now slightly deprecated RESTconf Yang data Yang extension to the SX structure extension. So we made this change in the document. It would be nice to get some implementer feedback that we have done this right. Yeah, then we should be pretty much done with the Komai work. So looking at the chat, Wojtek points out that Laurent Tutin already contributed changes to Pyang. I think there was still some ongoing discussion of those changes. So talking about the previous item, the errata report. So yeah, let's check this offline. We are making progress here. But I think it's good for the community to look at that. And actually, I should take the opportunity to point out we are getting a lot of support from the Czech Nick, from people like Wojtek, who is in the chat right now, and Maria. So this really helps with completing this item of work. Okay, any questions on Komai? Then let's talk about the two new documents. As Marco pointed out, the Yang metadata draft is now a working group document -00. So the background is RFC 7952. 50 is Yang, 51 is Yang JSON. 52 defines how to do metadata annotations, which are essentially using the attractive feature of XML to allow attributes on elements. And this is made available in the form of metadata annotations. There is a way in your Yang module to say what metadata annotations this module provides. And the fun part about it is that you can attach these metadata annotations to completely unrelated, to data governed by completely unrelated Yang models. So this is a very good way to after the fact, add some information like provenance or timestamp information or things like that that has not been foreseen by the original Yang data model. So this was defined for Yang XML and Yang JSON and not for Yang CBOR. In contrast to the Yang JSON version, which is really complicated, it turns out that doing this in CBOR is almost trivial. So the document is pretty simple, and currently it doesn't really look like we will have to do a lot more development on that. I think the remaining question is how do you actually signal the capability and the fact that some metadata are in Yang CBOR object. So that's probably where we will have the next discussions. But the actual functionality of including metadata is added to Yang CBOR by defining a tag. So we're currently provisionally using the number 109. And you essentially can take any Yang CBOR item and replace it by this tag, which is has a content of an array, and the array is a metadata map and the original instance representation. So that provides a very simple way to intersperse the metadata. And right now it seems that that's actually all we need besides defining the media type information. So this already looks pretty stable, and we could make a call for implementations at this point in time. So the next steps that I'm looking forward to is getting some reports from implementers that they actually did use this and were able to represent metadata that they also can represent in Yang XML and Yang JSON. And together with the signaling aspect, the media type parameters, probably this should actually become ready for working group last call pretty soon. And of course, we want to involve the NetBot working group in this process, keep them informed of where we are so we don't get a late surprise. So this document might be on a pretty fast track if we get input from implementers. Any questions on Yang metadata? Okay. Then let's talk about the other Yang CBOR project, which isn't quite there yet. We probably will ask for working group adoption in the period between now and Vienna. Yang is a text-based representation, both in its original XML form and in the JSON form that was added to it. And even binary data is represented by base 64ing it in the XML and the JSON. But in CBOR, we can have binary data, and we are using that for the built-in type binary, of course. But there are other data types that we actually want to handle in binary form, and that's what this stand-in tags document is about. So if you look on the right side of the slide, there is a little table. These are not all of them, but there are a few derived types defined by RFC 9911, which is the recent update to 6991, which is the not so recent update to 6021, 6020, I forget. Anyway, so these are kind of the predefined types that the Yang ecosystem defines for you. And obviously date and time is a really important predefined type. There are others like UUID and MAC address and dotted quads, which are used for router IDs, IPv6 addresses, and so on. So these are, as I said, text-based in Yang, but we can represent them in CBOR in binary form. And yeah, so date and time is tag 1 in CBOR, UUID is tag 37. We probably need to define two new tags for MAC address and dotted quad because we don't have those. IP address is tag 54. And we directly want to use these tags to do the stand-in for the text-based data that you would find in the other representation formats and that you do find in CBOR today, unless you enable this mechanism. So Wojtek says you most likely meant RFC 6991. Yeah, that's the predecessor to 9911 that we are now using. So 9911 has a minor but pretty important corrections in the date and time information, and that's probably what we want to start out from for tag 1. So what we still need to understand is what exactly is the processing model. So what combinations of components do we cater for? In the simplest case, you have a Yang client or a netconf client, a RESTconf client, a CUMI client that uses information from a server. And there it's relatively simple because the two can actually negotiate when setting up their connection. And the question is, where do we do this negotiation? Is it just agreeing on a media type, which we could even do with existing content negotiation mechanisms? Or do we need some special support? Do we put this into the Yang library mechanism? This is not entirely understood. What we have found out in the recent discussion is that we probably want to have a file that describes all those stand-ins. So essentially the content of the table on the top right of the slide, that would become a stand-in file, and that would be exchanged between client and server to make sure that there is agreement on what stand-in tags are in use, because the list of stand-in tags is always going to grow, and we have to make sure that both sides understand those stand-in tags. So the next steps are nailing down this processing model, fully defining the structure and content of the stand-in file. And yeah, then we should be able to do a call for adoption, and then we essentially enter the same sequence of events that metadata is in. So we will try to get implementation reports and do the working group work, and finally do a working group last call. Any questions about that?
Christian, I'm just about linking this and the metadata aspect. Could those use the same negotiation mechanism, because they're really both about, I do support this tag, and then you can use it?
Yes. we probably want to do the negotiation in terms of the Yang ecosystem. And in the Yang ecosystem, metadata is something very different from the stand-in thing, which is just a local optimization of the CBOR word. So I'm not sure that we should reduce this. These tags are in use, because also there may be some progression in the way we are using the tags. So date and time has just received this update in 19.9.11. Yeah, we need to think about that. But that's a good point, that all this is driven by CBOR tags, of course. And we might use that as a simplifying commonality.
Christian, you also want to raise the comment you had in the chat?
No, that can stay in the chat. It's
Okay.
below what makes sense for.
Yeah, so let me answer that quickly. The document, the specification 7952, of course, limits metadata to what you actually can represent in XML attributes. So it's not like somebody sat there and thought we need metadata and then started to think about how do we do this in XML. But this was just the attractive feature of XML leaking through in terms of a metadata annotation extension. And then this JSON people struggled representing this in Yang JSON documents. So you cannot put lists or leaf lists into metadata. These are all scalar values, because XML attributes are essentially meant for scalar values. But it's useful. Things like timestamps and maybe provenance information can be represented in scalar data. Any other questions? Yeah, and as Wojtek points out, we are not trying to provide all the functionality that CBOR could. There are some interesting discussions about the role that any data provides in the Yang environment, in the Yang ecosystem. Yeah, it's sometimes difficult in Yang to control these things properly. So we are not trying to offer all the complexity and functionality of CBOR here in the metadata document. Thanks for pointing that out, Wojtek. Any other questions? Good. Then I'll leave the CoreConf / Yang CBOR subject and go on to corrections and clarifications. So corrections and clarifications has been a working group document for a while now, and the objective is to collect corrections and clarifications to the various documents that describe that specify CoAP and its ecosystem. So mainly on 7252, but of course also on other documents that are relevant in that space. And the idea is that we start documenting issues in the GitHub repository. Once we start to understand the issues well enough to understand what we need to do, we generate pull requests. And we just had one successful execution of this cycle I will talk about in a minute. but we have some 38, I think, issues still open. So we are not going to get bored. We have to get these issues addressed. Sometimes the resolution will just be, okay, that issue just found out what CoAP is, which there's no action required. But in many cases, it's a bit more complicated. And so, for instance, one issue that we might be able to address next is issue 51, which deals with the fact that the sender of a request has a choice between using individual URI-something attributes, URI path, URI host, URI query, or putting these all into a proxy URI option. And the assumption always is that the more constrained systems deal with fully parsed URI something options, and the proxy UI is only used in those weird cases where you have to. And one of these cases might be that you have to talk to an HTTP server somewhere, and you may need to put in options that a normal CoAP server might not understand. Anyway, so the question was, is that something that every client can do willy-nilly, or do we expect some discipline here that clients don't throw proxy URIs at random servers? So that's an interesting discussion, and it got very concrete in the next document we will talk about, the URI path abbreviation document. And I think we now have a better understanding for how we want to do this. There's actually text in the URI path abbrev document, which might help us resolve issue 51. So this is in progress. Let me talk about two options, two issues that we seem to have a handle on. So one has been the 402 unprocessable option error case. And there was something weird in the specification about that, which would have required rejecting a non-conformable request. And it turns out that gets in the way of having 4.02 do its job in terms of negotiation between two peers, which options here actually are available. And there was a mandate to reject when actually 4.02 would be more appropriate. So we now have written that up, and because the change is normative in effect, we need to put the change into a normative document, and the next normative document that we are probably going to complete is URI path abbrev, which happens to actually benefit from this. So things come together nicely. So the text that briefly was in corrections and clarifications now has migrated to Appendix A of URI path abbrev, and the text that was in corrections and clarifications has been replaced by a stub. So that's the remaining text, and we need to review this text some more, and then we can probably wrap up this issue. So that was a successful execution of this cycle with an actual normative change. So URI path abbrev now updates 7252 because that is behavior that is explicitly mandated in 7252 in the CoAP specification. That doesn't make sense. and we are fixing this up here, and of course need to somehow manage the transition. So of course not all systems will immediately be able to benefit from this update. Okay, that was issue number 52. And the last item I want to talk about is an issue that came up in multiple GitHub issues, 48 and 54, where we have text that nonsensically requires piggyback response, even if the request comes in a non-confirmable message. And that, of course, doesn't work. Piggyback is only available for confirmable messages. So that essentially creates an inconsistency. And we now have a pull request that you are requested to look at that fixes this. Again, this is a change we probably have to put in somewhere. And there is some additional discussion on the influence of suppression. We have an RFC with a number of which I forget, that allows you to control which responses are actually sent back to a non-confirmable request. And yeah, there's also a discussion of the 501 not implemented catch-all that we have adopted in CoAP, but that this requirement to send a 405 for an unsupported or unrecognized method is kind of conflicting with. So there is text there, and I would like to allow people to look at the pull request, and we may need to continue this discussion a little bit, because one of the observations in the issues was that a proxy may not actually be able to do what is described as a must do in the current text. So we may have to put this on a slightly more realistic foot. So it's still nice to get back the method not allowed error in a piggyback response. You shouldn't have to wait for it for some reason. But nice to have and must are two different categories, so we probably want to fix that at some point. Questions on this? Yeah, ESCO points out that this is dealing with technical debt, and indeed we have a lot of technical debt. It's really minor issues, but still implementers notice things like that over time, and we need to slowly get rid of it. And for that, it's really useful if you occasionally look at the Corkla repository and look at the active pull requests there and at the active issues, and maybe make some comments. Looks good to me, or this has these additional problems you haven't talked about. Yeah, this essentially was an ad block here for everyone to do their little 5 cents for getting rid of the technical debt. Okay. Any more questions on this? In which case we can go to the next presenter. So this is URL path abbreviation, Christian.
Yes, thank you. Can I have slide control, or will you just advance me?
Yeah, I just have to press all these various buttons that I have to press to make that happen.
So, yeah, URI path abbreviation is something we started in summer last year basically around the need of documents that they want to have, especially the well-known paths, which, like literally by being .well-known long, make those shorter. I won't go into details of the why and the how because I've presented this in the last IETF just as well, but talk about how we can get this done and like what happened since the last IETF. The three things to do were basically what Carsten just walked us through. That is moving in the text around handling of the bad option. There is little mechanical effect of the normative change to implementers of this document because they would still need to work with peers that did not see the normative change. But all of this only affects the what we call the tentative use of the option. That is when you don't know whether the peer supports it, and that's a rather niche case and should only be done when you have like reasonable indication that this would probably work. Because if you basically go back and forth with a round trip of trying the short version and it doesn't work, that is way more expensive in terms of bytes on the wire than just doing the defensive thing and sending the URI all the way. So it's it's a bit of a niche situation in this document, but there is a small part that is when you don't know the precise values that work, where you can already simplify the implementation based on knowing that the peer at least has basically seen this document, seen this update to come up, and can act accordingly. The other change that Carsten also mentioned was around the proxy URIs, where I'm not sure whether whether I can agree with you on like whether this document really helps progress issue 51 in core law, because the latest changes really meant that this document's requirements on the handling of URI path of proxy URI are weaker now. A change that I did, what happened there? A change that I did already for the -03 that was submitted for the cutoff was that working through cases when we could have a proxy URI conflicting with the URI path abort option, I found that the one inconsistency we tried to cater for was when a proxy would introduce a path segment or remove a path segment, but that's not really the concern. So proxies inserting the path segment would have been the issue, and as even in the case of using the option by option expression of the URI, that is having a proxy scheme and then maybe a URI host and a URI path, etc. This would already have been unsupported by this document, because after some initial versions, we decided to not support mixing the URI path and the URI path abort option. It just makes all the processing easier, and this should be a simple fix for the simple subset of the problem. So now that we apply the mandate not to change those paths consistently across URI path and URI path abort options, the document became simpler, but I did not in -03 perform all the simplifications, and catching up with that in the process of also addressing other comments that I received during since publication of -03. The document now has additional requirements removed. That is, there are no requirements at all anymore for added for proxies, and the previous normative statement that server should probably, but we know you wouldn't because it's a niche situation, support receiving a URI path along with, or a proxy URI along with a URI path abbreviation, could be completely removed and only for the cases where it would actually happen, which is the very weird situation of an endpoint being addressed as a proxy, even though it actually serves the requests on its own. Only that case would have to do anything special, and that is now described more precisely in this document. There are minor other changes, mostly editorial, processing the feedback that I got from Carsten at ESCO. I don't see. Do you see my slide? I don't see it, but I have it on the other screen, so I can work on that. Okay. And yeah, I think this is basically done. I had asked the chairs whether there's anything more that they're asking from the authors. Otherwise, I suggest we could put this into a working group last fall. Thank you. Carsten?
Can you say a couple of things about implementation status?
There is one implement. There are two implementations. I have implemented it more or less. So I have implemented the server side in AIO co-op. We're leaving the client side really to the application, because the library cannot know whether or not there is indication of the server supporting this feature. There's also a lib co-op where I think John has implemented this in October and provided a bit of feedback that has been incorporated into this document.
So can we run an interop already?
I have tried, but I could probably just pick up John's branch and run that. I'll have
designate a day where. Should we designate a day where we try doing this?
I don't know whether we really need an interop event with like every implementer running it, because if I'll have to look up whether John's branch has been published so far, and if it has been, maybe I can just locally take those two, or John can take the two implementations and locally use them. Yeah. Wojtek mentions we could do this in look at it in the interim. Probably do something as preparation for the interim. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I hope in the interim we can report on the successful interop.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know if John. I don't see John in the room. Yeah.
Correct. So let's clarify this offline, whether we can do that. But I think usually it's a good idea, if you do an interrupt testing, that both sides of that testing have high bandwidth communication going on. So that may be something we can schedule at some point, but that may be a very low friction event, low threshold event doing that. Anyway, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Christian on this? Next is Jaime then.
Do you share, Marco, or?
Well, Carsten was in control, and I guess is in the process of giving you control.
Well, you should be seeing the slide already.
I see the
slide.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. Then if you share, I don't share. And if it's okay, since we are very few here, I can just do it from the chair here. So the co-op PubSub draft we are now on iteration 19. There has been a couple of reviews by Marco and thank you, Carsten. By Marco and Christian. And I would just basically go quickly through the changes and maybe update a little bit on the architecture, just a reminder. So the core of the idea is that there is a broker sitting between publishers and subscribers. The subscribers put the data there with the put method. Subscribers observe, and the broker stores and forwards those messages. So this lets sleepy NAT devices also to participate without having the need for direct reachability there, and it decouples producers and consumers. On the topic resource side, there is 2 levels of resources. So there is the topic resource, well, there's a topic collection for discovery, and then there is a topic resource that holds configuration. So things like the name or the content format, the expiration, and others. And then the topic data, which is where the actual subscription with Observe happens. And then the topic data URI does not have to be hosted at the broker. It can be pointing to another server entirely. Then on the life cycle, there is 3 states. Topic can start as have created. Once a publisher publishes on and pushes data, it becomes fully created, and then subscribers can observe that data. Sorry, the image is a bit small, but you have it in the document. It's the same. Then deleting a topic data sends it back to have created state. And maybe a little change, and I will comment more on that, is the initialized property that now it can skip have created and it goes directly into the created state. So what were the changes in the last version? Which is basically on the working group last call review. The biggest change was the initialize. So Christian pointed out, I think it was Christian actually, or Mark. No, it was Christian who pointed out that sending notifications without the content format was an RFC 7641 violation. So we need to have a consistent content format, and we changed that as well. Then on the topic data, there was a problem with the persistence of the property of the topic data property. So basically, before, when you deleted the topic data, you also removed the property. So you need to create it again because publishers wouldn't be able to republish. So that is now explicitly immutable after creation. And then, there's other drafts that were made, were normative, and we just made them informative because they were blocking publication. There's actually also the ACE PubSub draft that is going to be published earlier than this one. That is also referring this one. So that is another reference issue we need to follow up on. And then another change on the response code. So they were very strict. So we relaxed them a little bit and just referred to the original co-op spec. Same thing for, either success or errors. So basically now the implementer can choose what they prefer. Similarly with clarifications, the maximum subscribers is a hint that the broker ultimately decides how to use. And then, we made it explicit that you can choose to host your resources on a different server. And I don't remember the normative statement of unsubscribe. I don't remember that one. Sorry. You have it in the changes. And then some definition aspects. We also got the Cibor key registry as well there. So there's a Cibor key space that has this registration policy well defined. It was already well defined in previous versions, but we did also a few needs there. I think, Christian also pointed out that there is some text string keys in Cibor registries that are never actually used in practice, so we dropped them. And then I think there was also some little needs here and there with the conf filter name. So we also edit those. And then basically the status is that I think that the comments from Marco and Christian have been addressed. ESCO was, even before this version, we already addressed the comments from ESCO. The early review from Ayana has been resolved, I believe. Also, the repo has been cleaned up. There was a lot of older references. So I have an implementation of the co-op based on IO co-op of this broker, and I think it has been updated to version 19. I believe maybe not fully actually, but at least it has been updated as well. So it matches better the current broker specification. And then I also got a couple of weeks ago some editorial needs from Marco that I merged. So that will require a version 20 submission. And that is it, I think. So from my point of view, I think it's pretty much done. And yeah, so basically it's now for the, in my opinion, chair hat off, is ready for the shepherd to be taken. But let's do Q&A. That's it.
Yeah, let me quickly point out that from the process sequence of events, we completed the working group last call. We are still processing a few details, but that should only take a couple of days more. And the next step is for the shepherd to actually generate the shepherd write-up. So this is where ESCO will come in again. And when we have agreement on the shepherd write-up, we can submit this to the ISG.
Sounds good. And I mean,
Correct.
if anybody has comments, the workflow we have with the PRs is pretty good. So if, you know, just do a PR and I will check it and commit it. I mean, if it is discussion, then the email is good, but otherwise PRs are preferred.
Yeah, like I mentioned, we need for sure the version 20, so that an actual new draft version includes that merged PR.
Yep.
Correct.
Well, thank you. And thank you all the reviewers for the time. By the way, I know that both you, Marco, and Christian took a really long time to go through and be thorough. So it's much appreciated. I will have to review as well and spend more cycles on that to get more of the little duckies that we have here.
Okay, so let's get this done in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Jaime. And yeah, one disadvantage of this giving slide control to presenters is that they can close the presentation, which defeats the mechanism that MeetEcho now has for supporting quick reuse of the media channel. So the next one on the agenda is the the co-op of a bundle protocol. Sorry.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Carlos Gomez, and I'm going to present the last update of the draft entitled Co-op over Bundle Protocol, BP. My co-author is Ana Calveras, and we're both from UPC. On the status of the draft, it was adopted right after Madrid, and today I'm presenting revision 02, which aims to address the comments that were received in the last meeting, and also we tried to solve the last pending to-dos in the draft. On the table of contents, we added a little bit of new content within section 11, and then we applied some internal organization within that section. But otherwise, the top-level structure of the document remains basically the same as in the previous version of the draft. So now let's go through the updates in this last revision. The first updates are in section 8.1 on co-op blockwise transfer parameters. We already had text on the max payloads parameter. As you may recall, this indicates the number of consecutive blocks an endpoint can transmit without eliciting a message from the other endpoint. And the default value specified in RFC 9177 is 10 for this parameter. So we added the new content, which is highlighted in red here. The motivation in RFC 9177 for that default value of 10 is based in turn on RFC 6928's motivation for a TCP initial window of 10 segments. The motivation actually reads as follows: 10 segments are likely to fit into queue space available at any broadband access link, even when there are a reasonable number of concurrent connections. And we've added that, however, the previous statement assumes typical internet characteristics and TCP segment sizes. So we are dealing with co-op over BP here. And for co-op over BP environments, the characteristics of the BP paths and co-op message sizes involved need to be considered when setting max payloads. For example, the characteristics of the path in a deep space environment running co-op over BP will probably or not necessarily be the same as those of a terrestrial wireless sensor network running co-op over BP. Then in section 11 on securing co-op over BP, again, we added some short new content, which is basically subsection 11.3, and then we applied this structure of subsections so that 11.1 and 11.2 have the actual content was already existing, and the only new thing about those first two subsections is their titles. The first is DTLS versus OSCORE, second one is OSCORE and BPSec, and what is new is 11.3, which is entitled Security Requirements of Co-op Requests and Responses over BP. So here the new content that we have is that when co-op is carried over BP, a co-op response should be protected with at least the same level of security as its corresponding co-op request. Well, not sure if this might be sufficient. On the other hand, a few days ago, Marco sent a review of the draft. Many thanks, Marco. This is very much appreciated. And one of the comments was about this content, and he mentioned that this text probably referred to the perspective of the bundle protocol, because both DTLS and OSCORE would have their own rules to protect co-op responses. And yeah, definitely we agree with that, and we plan to make it explicit and perhaps elaborate in the next update of the draft. Okay, then in section 12.2, we completed the content of an IANA request. The DTN working group produced RFC 9758, which, among others, creates the concept of a well-known service number. And in this document, we request the assignment of a well-known service number for co-op in the IPN scheme URI well-known service numbers for BP version 7 registry. And yeah, we have completed the content here, and also we have updated some instances throughout the draft where we refer to this request. Then, and finally, on the security considerations, there is some text that you may recall where we explain that there is a risk when a node uses message aggregation, which is that every single message that's the individual messages and aggregate messages composed of needs to carry the payload length option, which, however, is class U for OSCORE, so it's unprotected. And the risk is that an attacker might perhaps infer some features of the communication based on the payload size of the messages. And in the last meeting, we received comments from Marco and from Martina suggesting that perhaps we might want to consider using the padding option, which is defined in the cacheable OSCORE draft. And indeed, that's a great suggestion. Thanks to both. And yeah, we have added that it is possible to mitigate this risk. And in that case, a single message would first be padded, and then the padded message would be protected with OSCORE. And padding option is class E for OSCORE, so it's protected with encryption and integrity protection. And even if the OSCORE protected message would still have a visible payload length, then an attacker would not be able to know what part of that payload length is actually corresponding to actual data or padding. Then Marco also had a comment that perhaps we might want to reduce a little bit the requirement level, let's say, of using or depending exactly on the padding option as described in the cacheable OSCORE draft, maybe rather cite it more like an example, so that we could also refer to it as an informative reference rather than a normative one, which is the current state in 02. So yeah, we also agree with that, and we plan to do that in the next update in revision 03. Okay, so about next steps. Yeah, the first one is addressing Marco's comments on 02. otherwise, it appears that the document is maybe getting stable, perhaps not only in the structure, perhaps also a little bit about the content itself. We are not requesting working group last call, but perhaps it would be great to get maybe reviews in the current state of the document. Also, we would like to say that we have received already lots of feedback from the DTN and the core working groups, and it has all been very helpful. But yeah, anyway, getting more reviews, perhaps now that we might be getting a bit more stable now, could also be very useful. So I think that's my last slide. I don't know if there may be any comments or questions.
While people are queuing up for their comments and questions, quick question. What is the implementation status at this point in time?
Yeah, we have a section in the draft which describes details about one implementation, which for the part of CoAP is based on IO CoAP, and then for the BP side is based on micro DTN. And yeah, on that section, there's a description of the implementation. There are also links to GitHub. So that implementation complies with one of the previous versions of the draft, so not the latest one or ones, but also we are in the process of getting more people involved and developing a bit further, updating the implementation to the latest state of the draft.
So what would be a good time to tell people, hey, this is now ready to implement?
Well, perhaps at least to start working on that, perhaps even now could be a good moment. We are wondering whether there is something we might be missing, but again, the state of the document seems to be getting stable. So yeah, perhaps if anyone wants to try implement this, it would be possible to start right now. And yeah, let's hope. I don't know if there will be like significant changes in the next updates of the draft, but yeah, let's say that perhaps now is already a good moment.
So yeah, I would expect that there will be updates of this document. So we should use the submission of a new revision as a point to consider whether this is a revision that we actually can identify as an implementation draft, as a draft that we ask people to actually implement. So once we have reached that level of confidence, we should communicate that confidence to implementers. So I think that would be a good step after getting a few more reviews, reacting to those reviews with a new revision. And then we could either identify this as an implementation draft or maybe wait for the next revision after that. So people know they should be doing that. And then we can actually start thinking about the interoperability event. I'm ignoring the time is over thing up there because we do have some flexible time in this meeting, so we don't have to rush this. I think we should be creating our strategy for moving this forward. Christian.
Oh, Christian here. Thanks for updating the document with the proxying scenarios. That is really helpful in understanding the setup. One thing that I would suggest for the next iteration, but I'd encourage you to consider is whether under the aspect of hiding information around the endpoints or about the length of messages, it might make sense to also to apply security on a hop by hop basis in addition to the end-to-end security. I can send you the links to the precise document that might help there. But a concrete reason why I'd encourage that to happen now is because it would also affect the use of of multiple messages in a single message using the payload length when protected through OSCORE, because that might enable like packing out, really taking one of those bundles and packing it and protecting it as a whole with less consideration for individual message security.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, thanks for the comment. And yeah, if I understood correctly, and you can provide the pointer, yeah.
It's in the chat now.
In the chat, yeah. I was reading it right now. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll take a look at that as well. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Christian, you're still in the queue. You want to say something more? No. Any other questions or comments for Carlos? I guess no. Thanks a lot again, Carlos.
Thank you.
Next is Richard.
Yes. Me turn on the video also. So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Richard Höglund, and I would like to present some updates to this document key update for OSCORE, which has now reached version 13. And just to recap what this is about, it is about renewing the master secret and master salt for OSCORE, which will in turn result in driving new sender and recipient keys. And there can be multiple reasons you would like to do this. For instance, application policies, and we also have a related draft about OSCORE key usage limits, which specifies certain recommended limits for key usage. And this is something that comes from CFRG originally, basically stating that if you use a key too many times, you may actually start weakening the properties of the AAD algorithm. Kudos doesn't change the ID context, nor does it change the sender and recipient IDs. It's also agnostic to whatever means you used initially to create this OSCORE security context, whether it's adhoc or hard-coded or some ACE profile. And essentially what you do, you start with a CTX old, you execute kudos, and then you get this CTX new, which is your brand new context with new keys inside. In version 10, we did a kind of major redesign, which is now more like explicitly state machine based. Other good properties about kudos, it can be initiated by either the client or the server. Also, we made it robust against pairs rebooting and losing state. Typically, it will finish in one round trip unless something goes wrong in terms of like messages lost or such. It's also flexible when it comes to the message flow. You do not have to have like explicit like this is like a purely kudos message, but rather any co-op message can be a kudos message. So you can actually use your like normal traffic to also execute kudos. And just to zoom in a bit, we have this extended OSCORE option to allow running kudos essentially, or adding the functionality we need for kudos. And the key aspects here is mainly that we defined the X byte and the nonce field. So the X byte contains the length of the nonce and also some bits. For instance, do you want to preserve observations? Do you want to run kudos in the forward secrecy or no forward secrecy mode? And also the kudos message type. So we have two message types. And just to comment on the forward secrecy and no forward secrecy mode, we do have a no forward secrecy mode for very, very constrained devices that are unable to store anything to persistent memory, meaning they cannot remember after reboot their latest CTX news. So they always revert back to some type of bootstrap material. In such case, they can run kudos in the no FS mode. And yeah, I mean, essentially what the core of kudos is the exchange of two nonces, N1 and N2, placed in this nonce field. Then you take the nonces together with the X byte and also your old key material, and from that you derive a new master secret and new master salt. We have a number of states defined for kudos. You can basically be in 3 different states: idle, busy, or pending. And this is also related to the state machine. It's not centered around these stages or states. So essentially, if you start in idle, when you transition back to idle, that means you have completed a kudos execution and you have your new CTX new, and you have also achieved key confirmation from the other peer. Yeah, I proceed. And this is an overview of the state machine. So you can also see the definition there on the top about divergent and convergent messages. Basically, divergent message means you're offering your own nonce. You have not received the other peer's nonce. Convergent is you're offering your own nonce, but you have already received the other peer's nonce. And these message types are indicated in that in the X bytes in the set bit, setting it to 0 or 1 as appropriate. And as you can see here, there's multiple paths you can take. I mean, typical successful kudos execution would, basically go from pre-idle to busy, and then you go back to pre-idle, successfully executing kudos. Now there are other paths if you have message loss or reboot or other complications. One thing to point out is if you look at the top right, there is this path from pending to busy with a lot of text above it. That is actually one path where we introduced a possible optimization in a previous version to be able to avoid taking that path. Some updates we did now for this version. So one big thing we did is define the SHIC compression of the extended OSCOR option. So this content was actually previously in the IETF SHIC 8824 update, but we discussed this and decided that it's probably better to do in this document due to the relation between the documents, which will also affect which references need to be normative or informative. So considering the timeline, it's better to have this content here. So what is this content? Well, basically, it's defining the field descriptors for SHIC. I mean, in particular here, what we're introducing new is the X byte and the nonce, right? We also have textual description on how to handle these X and nonce subfields. Furthermore, we have INA considerations for the SHIC compression of co-op fields registry, where we want to register, well, the field X and the field nonce under the OSCOR co-op option. And in addition to this, we also have an updated Yang data model, which now covers the extended format of the OSCOR option. Another update we did is we added, we have a lot of message flow examples just for people to understand or get a better feeling for how kudos can execute, because it can be quite straightforward if everything goes correctly. But if there is some complication, like a reboot or running kudos back to back or message loss, it's good to have message flow examples. So we added one more example now where kudos is initiated with a request message, but the final response is lost. And I can actually show that. They will also give an illustration in general of how kudos would work. So you see this request number 1 being sent containing the nonce N1, and as a response then from the server, you will get a response containing the nonce N2. And if you note also that the response will be protected with the new context, because at this point the server has both nonce N1 and N2s, and thus it can produce CTX new. When the client receives that response, it can also derive the new context CTX new. It will verify, decrypt the message practically. And if that succeeds, it can actually transition back to pre-idle, deleting the old context. And that's essentially the key update part, where the client also received key confirmation. However, it then continues because you would like to have one more message sent. So in this case, the client will send one more request. However, the response now from the server is lost, resulting in the server, resulting in the client sending the request again. And in this case, the response is successfully received by the client. And at this point, the server can transition to the pre-idle state, and it will also have successfully finished the kudos execution. And by the way, we have, like I mentioned, we have multiple further message examples, obviously also including like a vanilla completely successful execution. What's the summary and next steps? I mean, at this point, the design is stable. We do not plan any major modifications to the design or functionality. The main thing I think we've been working on is the implementation. So I've been working to update our Java implementation to be aligned with this latest state machine-based design. And we'd also have interest from other IETF contributors regarding implementing the new design. So hopefully we will have those two implementations to interop. And we do also have an implementation in C for the Contiki NG operating system that also needs to be updated to be aligned with the latest design. That is a later step, but we also plan to do that. Yeah, so thank you all for listening, and any comments, feedback, or review are very welcome.
Thanks, Richard. And thanks, Karsten.
Yeah, thanks, Karsten.
Any comment or question, anyone? Okay. Francisco.
Yes, see that comment in the chat saying here's the implementation. That's excellent. I wasn't aware of that. That's very good. Yeah. Yeah, let's think on that for sure.
So again, we may be thinking about organizing some interop in some form, some remote
Absolutely.
interop. Perfect.
And thanks, Christian, too. I had the memory you planned to implement it, but I wasn't sure. Okay. I guess I'm the next one. Right, thanks, Karsten. So this is an update on the Oscar capable proxies document that was also mentioned before during Carles' presentation, now in version 6. Yeah, as the name suggested, it essentially enables the use of Oscar also at proxies. So not only end-to-end between client and server as originally intended, but also between client and proxy, proxy and server, or two adjacent proxy. And in that respect, updates RFC 8613 and also RFC 8768 on the hop limit option, defining explicitly to be class U for Oscar. Out of this, you have interesting side effects. There's a way to be sure to protect options as much as possible whenever things can still work, basically upgrading those from their original class URI to class E. And you can also end up very easily to protect a single co-op message with multiple layers of Oscar. The typical case is both end-to-end between client and server, and also between client and adjacent proxy. Typically, that's going to be the case, I expect. And it works just as well also when group Oscar instead is considered. Okay, on recent updates. Well, this was actually presented last time, quite some time ago. So trying to squash updates happen since they're here. We added some more content and improved the text we had on the motivation and benefits for the update related to the co-op limit option. And we also clarified that there is an expectation for a proxy supporting Oscar to understand the options it has to deal with when sending out its messages for the sake of the possible class upgrade, for example. And more on the editorial point of view, we moved the section about the use cases to an appendix to make the document body less noisy. And on the message processing, we had a bit sparse here and there, the deviations from the original OSCAR RFC, and now those are all collected in the same section T1. It's also clear how inner and outer COP options using the original terminology are handled when it's about their processing. And we also extended a bit the security consideration. 4 to 5 was more a matter of minor editorial improvements. And here we are to the present, and the update made at this last round. We had quite a few references to update, both for IETF documents, but also for external specifications like OMA. This became up to date when we're referring those. Now it should be correct, and revised a bit the use of normative language and references to co-op, even removing something were really not appropriate. We have had for a long while a section related to the use of chic header compression when this method here is used. I found some bugs, or at least some misleading text that was suggesting a wrong behavior about the final use of the outer chic compression that is supposed to happen once and for all after all the OSCAR protections have been made on a message. So that should be fixed now. And there is also, in terms of language, a clear distinction between the inner and outer chic compression rules used in this context. More substantial update, and to keep the pace with other documents we've been working on here, now we are covering also the URI path algorithm option that Christian presented before, considering it as yet another option in the set of proxy-related options, and reasoning around it, both for the cases where we are talking about a forward proxy or reverse proxy. But fundamentally, nothing new, of course. It's just the mutual alternative to URI path. And the new text about this is in the terminology and largely in the section describing the processing of incoming requests, and then in the ASCII diagram that was honestly the most difficult thing to update editorially. Also something that Christian noted during a discussion we had in Madrid last year, I think, thanks a lot for that. Of course, in general, we need to have a non-first response to a certain request, including the partial AV from the server or proxy at this point that produces the response. Otherwise, we run into reuse of AA denunce, which is a security issue. And Christian noted that we were covering automagically already almost all cases from the work done in other documents already, but not one in particular, meaning when the response is protected specifically with OSCAR and is not an observed notification. This document enabling proxies to do OSCAR protection here is effectively enabling a case where we were not inheriting that safe behavior automatically, and now we are defining it explicitly in the sections related to the processing of a response from the point of view of the sender and the recipient. And it's the same rationale and line of thinking that we have always had in OSCAR and Group OSCAR, of course. Then Christian also gave an actual review. Thank you very much. That is really helpful. It was announced as a review of version 4. Judging from the comments and quoted text, it looked more like a review of version 1 and an old version of the individual submission even, but still, that was very helpful. Thanks. We sorted it out. And we addressed almost all comments. I'll come back to that. We have tried to clarify what we mean with consumer of an option for an incoming message. And we also revised the use of error codes or error handling in general. So you were right. In one case, 404 was definitely more appropriate. And in another case, we just removed, like you suggested, the whole error handling we were writing down, since things are just supposed to happen as the OSCAR RFC describes. Following also other suggestions from Christian, there were two relevant use cases that were buried in a section called Other Use Cases. We brought them out. Now they are self-standing subsections in Appendix A. It's about using this method to enforce access control at a proxy for the sake of identifying the client that wants to use the proxy altogether, and access control to the origin server via a proxy. And in that case, the proxy still wants to identify the client and then can act as a hard firewall or instead as a rate limiter. And we also added a suggested reference when you can find more details about that. We also had text in the section about processing incoming requests on the possible enforcement at the server of policies for decrypting a request or not, for example, if hiding behind the reverse proxy. Also following the recommendation from the review, now the text about that in that section has become minimal with a forward pointer to a new later subsection describing that a bit more in detail, more explanatory, and also with implementation considerations about that, I remember. And the related security considerations were also revised to be aligned with this update. Okay, I said we addressed almost all comments. I think we didn't touch 3 yet. 2 are editorial, and we just didn't make it in time before the cutoff to work on them properly. We will. And then there's a 3rd one, non-editorial. It's here in the slide. So Christian was wondering if we can give any guidance at all to proxies about even when they should try establishing an OSCORE association with the server, if they don't have one already, and if so, if SVCB resource records can help proxies to learn about what the server can do in the first place. So I try to unpack a bit the problem here. It can be a matter of the proxy, first of all, learning if the server supports ADOC for the sake of establishment. I think that's a no-brain. It boils down to using, hopefully, the same toolbox defined in a Lake document about that. But then it would help also for the proxy to learn about the support at the server of nested OSCORE protection. Yeah, I think SVCB can help here. I just wonder if we can help also in the case of a reverse DNS lookup, thinking of the URI of the server provided to the proxy through a literal IP address instead of a register name. So maybe it's possible. I don't know. And in addition, orthogonally to that, I wonder if it's worth or orthodox even to think about a new target attribute for using a link of a new well-known resource at the server, talking not of the resource, strictly speaking, but of the server as a whole. Assuming the proxy to have learned about these things somehow, a possibility would be for the proxy to open an OSCORE association with the server if it knows that the server supports OSCORE, and to use ADOC for doing that if it knows that the server also supports ADOC. We plan to follow up on the list to reply to Christian point to point with a focus on the 3 unaddressed comments, especially. On this in particular, is there any early input or opinion today already?
Christian, I'm just one. That nesting part will be tricky because we might discover that the server supports like 2 layers, but we can't and shouldn't know how many layers are in there. So it might be better to rely on guidance from the client. And I don't have any plan on how the client could provide that guidance, but if there should be some initiative from the server, I think it should be prompted by the client, or at least informed by something that the client does.
Yeah, and even that can probably be ambiguous or incomplete, but I agree the server can at most say, I support nested, but not really how many layers at most.
Well, it can say how many layers it supports, but if the client uses many layers, it won't tell the proxy how many there are.
Sure. Thanks, but we'll follow on the list then about that. Okay, and just to mention, we have 2 human-generated implementations of this. One in Java for California with a large support of both existing proxy-related options. It was tested in multiple combinations of use of Oscar on the different communication legs, and even trying it out when using observe and adhoc to establish the Oscar associations up front. One is more minimal, but still fully functional in Contiki, tested on constrained devices using Oscar both end-to-end and between client and proxy at the same time. Yeah, we still have to complete addressing Christian's review, as I mentioned, and we plan also some more text on the client side to complete the handling of multiple responses to the same request from the same next stop, I would say. And we think of adding at least one more example of message exchange with a minimal chain of 2 proxies. It will be useful to show. Comments and feedbacks anyway are welcome anytime. Thanks. And I wasn't following the chat really, sorry. Bring something up if there's anything. If none, I can move to the next one. Should I switch to the next slide, Karsten? Maybe it's faster for me.
Yes.
Okay. So this is an update on an individual submission on obfuscating the Oscar option, and I'm version 2. Yeah, as a recap, when protecting a co-op message with Oscar, the Oscar option is included, and it's not encrypted to facilitate operation at the recipient side. So its fields are in plain, and in particular, the partial AV and the KID field, including the sender sequence number of the sender node and its Oscar identifier. And that can be the starting point for inferring behavioral patterns of endpoints or even tracking them across different network paths. So some times ago, this was noted. It was hoped as a possible point of update in the future to do something about this, starting with the partial AV, but even better, also for the KID somehow. Yeah, the scope of this document is essentially about doing something about this as an intended update to the Oscar RFC. And it defines a method for obfuscating those 2 fields in the Oscar option. The partial AV for sure, and as the major part of the update in this revision, also the KID field, if separately explicitly agreed by the 2 peers. And these operations are supposed to be efficient as based on XORing with key streams that are derived through an additional key defined for the security context, but established once and for all together with the context. We are intentionally avoiding embed signaling to say on a per message basis if the method is used. That's just supposed to be written in the security context as part of its parameters. And this works both for Oscar and group Oscar. So as I mentioned, when the 2 peers establish the context, they have to agree on these 2, like they agree on the encryption algorithm to use. By default, if they don't explicitly agree, this method is not used. If the context is established to use this method, then it's used to protect, to obfuscate the Oscar option of every message protected with this context. So what did we change since November? Well, we, of course, took advantage of the feedback we got there. Thanks a lot. We extended the length of the standing KID used to obfuscate the plain value from 2 to 3 bytes, and that helps reducing the chances of false positive when inspecting recipient contexts to consider. And we also improved the main algorithm, especially on the recipient side, not really in its main steps and rationale, but more in terms of more efficient error handling and relation between the steps, especially for the sake of terminating the algorithm earlier if something is off. And the main point that I also mentioned before, that's largely based on feedback from Martine. Thanks a lot for that. We made it possible to obfuscate the KID field if there is a specific agreement on that, since the same goal in some use cases is achieved anyway, but in a more efficient way. I'll come back to that in the following slides. And we also extended the security considerations. Yeah, at some point, I really needed some new terminology, so I defined these terms to distinguish different types of security context. an ordinary security context is, well, a vanilla one as defined in OSCORE and Group OSCORE, and when using a context of the type, the method defined here is not used at all. Then we have an obfuscating security context that is clearly recognizable because it includes the newly defined obfuscation key for deriving the key streams. And when using that context, for sure, the partial AV is encrypted. But then there's a particular subtype of obfuscating security context that I call for now, there will be room for bike shedding, incognito security context. And if using that in particular, not only the partial AV is encrypted, but the KID field is also obfuscated. And the way to specifically recognize an incognito security context as such is left as local and implementation specific. So again, the type of specific context has to be agreed at establishment time. Now, on when and why not obfuscating the KID, well, like also discussed with Martinez, some use cases are better off without doing that and still achieve the same goal at the end of the day. Think especially of using SHIC for core compression header. That's based on following static compression rules with descriptors mapped against different fields in the message. And for the compression of the KID, they typically expect the presence of the KID with a predefined fixed value. And all the descriptors in the rule have to match with the candidate message to compress in order to compress it. So even in such use cases, we insist of doing the KID obfuscation like proposed in this document. Well, that will work, that the recipient can correctly process the message, but there will be no compression, and we will just achieve the intended effect in a less efficient way. If we let SHIC compression do its work, the KID field would have been elided altogether, and you would achieve obfuscation by elision, essentially. But for other more general use cases instead, KID obfuscation is the way to go, we argue. Okay, looking at the actual method here, on the sender side, it's first for sure about encrypting the partial AV. That is going to happen, and about that there are really no changes compared to the previous version of the document. So the slide here is only for reference. But then when we get into the second part, well, the main update was about making this part not necessarily happening, only if the security context uses specifically an incognito security context. Then we also obfuscate the KID, and the way according to which that is done is also unchanged compared to the previous version of the document. Only that when we produce the stand-in KID to put in the message, as I mentioned before, we extended its size to be of 3 bytes. Yeah, on the recipient side, it was largely about aligning with the update we made on the sender side. We still want to cover the general case where the recipient is storing a mix of contexts of different types, and without having an in-band signaling in the messages. So we have to be ready for the general case where the recipient side is also storing ordinary security context. And as a first assumption, it thinks that, oh, well, maybe this message was not obfuscated at all. Now I'm trying to recover an ordinary security context using the regular retrieval procedure described in the OSCORE RFC. And actually, it is not going to find one unless it has ordinary security context with the recipient ID of exactly 3 bytes in size, which is not exactly common. But in principle, it can find one, and it can be a false positive, which would lead to decryption failure. So if no context is found, or that false positive decryption fails, the recipient doesn't stop and starts inspecting the obfuscating security context. And it should really start from those that are not incognito security contexts, because focusing on those alone, it can apply, again, the retrieval procedure originally from the OSCORE RFC and hopefully find a context. Well, it will hopefully find something, and then consistent with the sender side, if it's specifically an incognito security context, there will be a local recomputation of the stand-in KID, and if it doesn't match what is in the message, this is not the right context, try another one. If there is a match, barring a false positive, this is the right context. irrespective of the context being incognito or not. It's an obfuscating security context, so there is going to be a restoration of the plain partial IV, and finally an AED decryption. Grupo score was completed already. It is completed now too. We just aligned it with the same updates made on the OSCORE algorithm. The same considerations, spirit and side effects remain unchanged. They are here just for reference. We added a new subsection about a special case that we forgot to include at the other time. When using Grupo score, this method is not really applicable. I would say not even relevant when specifically producing a deterministic request for cacheable OSCORE. And in that case, in that request, the KID and partial IV field are expected to be very fixed and very deterministic. So there's really no point anyway. On the security considerations, we added a new subsection discussing specifically the trial decryptions that are possible in general in case of a collision of identifier. We discussed those that can happen here because of this method. As mentioned before, there's at most one in the first phase of the recipient processing in case there are retrievable ordinary security context with a recipient ID of 3 bytes at least that by bad luck matches what is seen on the wire, or otherwise it can happen later on because of a false positive with the standing KID. But irrespective of what exactly happened, a failed decryption is a failed decryption, so the message processing must stop, and the recipient has to update the counters of failed decryption when using a decryption key consistent with the key usage limit for the used decryption algorithm. And then we also added content on security considerations related to, possible to not obfuscate the KID field that I mentioned before. So as next steps, the Grupo score part is completed in terms of method, but we have to describe side cases, for example, support for the external signature checker. And we need to define the suggested methods that two peers can use in OSCORE or in Grupo score to agree about using this method or not, and with what variant. We have a proof of concept implementation for a Californium aligned with the previous version of the document, so really obfuscating both fields. It has to be aligned with this version for the sake of possibly omitting the obfuscation of the KID. Thanks for the feedback so far. More feedback and comments are welcome. Thank you.
So, any feedback, any questions?
Thank you for bringing that up. That was a very, very good point. And I can say that from a protocol design, it wasn't difficult at all to make the change. Editorially, it was a bit painful, especially to ensure that the number of steps remain the same in the same order.
I'm sorry.
Good. So it seems we are done with our last item on the agenda. So the next item is any other business. So we will meet in 4 weeks for the core intro for the next one in April 22nd, I think.
Yes.
And let's get the bits flowing. Let's start preparing interrupts and demonstrating that documents are ready for the GNU+ Core.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all very much for your contribution.
Looking forward to seeing you face to face finally in Vienna.
Oh, very much so. And enjoy Shenzhen as long as you are still there.
Yep, I plan to. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Good morning. See you in Vienna.